Human beings like to be praised, don't we? To receive compliments of some kind. We may not like to receive all kinds of compliments, but it's in our nature to want to be praised and receive this praise from our peers. If we've done something, to be commended for it or praised. And studies have shown that people generally respond very favorable to these kinds of compliments. If your boss at work compliments you for your work, then you start to do better, even better at work. Your work improves, your work ethic and your performance. When our spouse compliments us, things improve. Everything might improve, in fact. And when our desire to be praised and responding well to compliments, liking them and acting in a way to get them to an extent, not attention-seeking necessarily, but considering that we are like this, why does God warn us not to practice righteousness to be seen by others? That's what we're focusing on, or what Jesus is going to focus on as He sets up this section here of Matthew chapter 6. Here's how He starts. Verse 1 says, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven." So this sets up this whole, not just these next three verses that we're going to look at tonight, but also the ones after that, and really kind of sets the tone for the whole chapter, what He's talking about. So what is it about, why did God do this? Why did Jesus warn this, considering how well we respond to praise and compliments and how we enjoy those things and they improve our mood or whatever it might be? What do you think? Okay, humility, the need for humility, definitely.
You can get addicted to it and you like it so much, and that's what you try to do, and you don't give anybody else any compliment.
Okay, yeah.
Too busy trying to do your own.
Yeah, that can really cause some issues at some point if that's what we're chasing, and could cause issues with other people. Yeah, Wayne?
Well, it's just like when preachers preach for the wrong reason, but the Bible says they're thankful that they're preaching Christ. God will deal with the attitude of why one preaches or why one gives or why one prays or does anything. He's looking for the heart. But too many people fail to do anything because they're afraid somebody's going to acknowledge it. And He wants to be acknowledged. God wants to be acknowledged, not the person. But you can't separate the two. When you do good, it's up to your heart and God why you did this, and He'll take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, good is done. Whether you do it for the wrong reason or right reason, good is done.
Yeah, that sort of putting all those together, if we are too drawn to compliments and praise by men, it can actually lead us down a very dangerous road, because if that's what we're hungering for, then that's going to be our motive behind it. So getting the praise of men, but then again, there are lots of things that we can do to get the praise of men that we shouldn't do. So if we're chasing after praise by people, that's going to lead us down the road and down a rabbit hole, really, of putting man's approval over God's approval, and that is a dangerous thing. So this sets the tone, and now what he's about to say is directly related to this statement. Just to point out a couple things in this verse before we move on. The word righteousness there, actually it's practicing your righteousness, is all one word. And it is a reference to the exercise of benevolent goodwill. That's what the word means. So some translations say, beware that you don't do your alms, something like that. And that's what it's talking about, is charitable giving is in view here in this case. And then the word to be seen in the active, it's from a verb that means to have an intent look at something, to take something in with one's eyes, with implication that one is especially impressed. But this is in the passive voice, which means to be noticed or to attract attention by somebody. So that's the idea, is attracting attention. So this is what Jesus is warning against. Now, how do we reconcile this verse with Matthew 5:14 through 16, where Jesus said, "You are the light of the world"? I guess just Matthew 5:16. How do we reconcile Matthew 6:1 with Matthew 5:16? "Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven." What do we do with that?
Well, the key is the last part of that phrase, that they give glory to your God in heaven.
Okay.
So here again, it goes right back to attitude that prompts you to do whatever you do in life.
Yeah, there's one difference is whose glory are you seeking? Are you seeking your own glory or are you seeking God's glory? So yeah, that's part of the motive. Anybody see any other things maybe that?
Well, it says that do it in such a way that, so that again is like where the focus is. You're not doing it for the praise of men, you're doing it to help people, and in the meantime, they're going to praise God because of your actions.
Okay. So, in one case, it sounds like Jesus is saying to do good works so that people may see them. And then the other one, it sounds like he's saying, or it doesn't sound like he's explicitly saying, don't do it in front of other people.
Well, it might be kind of simplistic, but like if you take 2 big boxes of food in the food pantry and set them outside and leave, it's still going to help everyone who comes to get them.
Mhm.
Or you could take them in and they go, "Oh, you're so generous. That's so great of you," and you can get all full up of yourself and go, "Oh yeah."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just very simplistic, but
Yeah, that's one possibility is, but I guess the question would be, does that mean it's necessarily wrong to, in your example, to take it in, take the box of food in there? Or is there something else involved in Matthew 6:1 that distinguishes the two concepts? Because we know they can't be contradicting each other, because not only does the Bible not do that at all, but this is the same speech by Jesus. I mean, he's continuously been talking here, and already he's saying something that seems like a contradiction. But I think the main key is the phrase in 6:1, "in order to be seen by them." That seems to be the main key. And that's not to mention that it's not difficult in Matthew 5:16 when it sounds like a similar phrase when he says, "Let your light shine so that they may see." So they're very similar. But I think the motive is implied in chapter 6, verse 1. The motive of the only reason you're doing this, or the main reason, is simply to be seen by men doing it. Not you happen to be seen and you want people to see as a good example. After all, how can we have a good example on others if they don't see us doing things? But in this case, the whole motive behind it is to be seen by men, and the implication is to get praise of men. It's got nothing to do with helping. It's got nothing to do with good. It's got nothing to do with God. It's simply to do with you and getting praise by men. That's the implication of the last part. They will have no reward, and you will have no reward from your Father who's in heaven. Why? Because He wasn't even in the picture. He wasn't in your heart or mind. You are trying to get glory for yourself. So, another Greek scholar said that the word translated "to be seen" involves more than just seeing, but it includes the idea of desire and pleasure. So you're doing it out of this desire to be seen by men. So if people aren't going to see you, you're not going to do it, is sort of the implication. But if people will see you, then you'll do it. So they don't contradict each other. In one case, Jesus is talking about your influence in doing good and bringing glory to God by doing good. In this case, he's talking about ulterior motives of selfishness and self-centeredness and getting the glory of men. That is never acceptable to God. And Jesus called the Pharisees out for these kinds of things, and that's what he's going to do to an extent here in chapter 6.
With Lazarus and the rich man, Abraham told the rich man, you had good things while you were there, and he didn't. And now the roles are reversed. So that kind of is part of this too. If you're doing it to be seen by men, you're getting what you want here.
Yeah.
Your focus is not in the right place. So if your focus isn't in the right place while you're here, don't expect that his focus is going to be on you.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely a similar principle there. Yeah. Their reward, which that's what he's going to say in the next verse. Wayne, did you have something else?
As you pointed out in that verse, in order to be seen by others. And in Matthew 5:16, same way let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father. So that one points out specifically, give glory to God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the world and man may see us do good works and heap praise upon us and say we're doing it to be seen, but that's their judgment of us. We stand accountable to God, so no one has a right to judge another's heart, what their motive is.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people fail to do anything because they don't want to be seen.
Yeah, and that's one thing that can make a difference in whether God gets the glory or I do is how I respond to the praise, the compliments. Nothing wrong with giving praise. The application here is not to commend, our brothers and sisters or whatever for doing good. We should. Shower them with compliments and encouragement like that. But how we respond to that might have a big impact on whether or not God actually gets the glory. If we respond or react in such a way that we, soak it all up and, pat ourselves on the back, that's one thing. But if we could help to, deflect to God, kind of like Joseph did with interpreting the dreams. And he's like, I can't do what you're asking. God will do it. There is a God in heaven. He'll do it. Give him the glory. He's the one that's doing it. So
Sometimes in like a small town, even if you start something yourself, other people will see it and they'll want to join in, and it ends up being a good thing.
yeah, exactly.
Everybody wants to work together and help, like if somebody has whatever cancer or I don't know what, but something, and everybody knows everybody in a small town, so they're willing to help, and if you start it, and then that would be a good thing, and you could work together with everybody else.
Yep. And that requires it to be seen, doesn't it? But it's not being done in order to be seen. It's being done and it's being seen, but it's not being done so that it will be simply so that it will be seen. I think that's the key there. A very big difference in motive and spirit behind it. So in chapter 6 here, Jesus is going to go over three traditional areas, I guess, of righteousness that the Jews would do to be seen of men. Giving here in these verses, then praying, and then fasting in 16 through 18. So here's what he says in verses 2 through 4, or verse 2 to start off. Thus, branching directly off from what he just got done saying, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. Okay. When you give to the needy, notice already that the implication is going to be that they will be giving to the needy, and they will be giving to the needy regularly. Just the fact that he even says this implies that it was something that was done and that it will continue to be done. And we don't know if he means literal, if he's mainly talking of literal things, figurative things, especially with the trumpet business. But I think the point is pretty simple and clear. We all would understand the significance of sounding a trumpet. In every situation where a trumpet could be sounded, the purpose of it is to be heard, isn't it? I mean, whether it's before a battle, whether it's in a song, whether it's, a warning, it is to catch people's attention and to be heard. The word that's translated sounded trumpet, that's all one word again in the Greek. It means to publicize something with fanfare. So it seems it is a figurative thing. But picture this. He's also painting a picture here. Somebody's going to go up and they're going to give to the needy, okay? And before they do, they pull a trumpet out of their back pocket and blast that thing. And what's everybody in the general vicinity going to do? They're going to turn and they're going to all be looking at this man. And then he says, I want you to have this. And then he looks up, oh, hi everybody. What are you looking at me for? Because he just blew a trumpet. So it's kind of almost a humorous picture, even if, we think of it that way. But that's sort of the picture that's being painted. Of course, I don't know if he was meaning to paint that sort of newspaper clip kind of comic strip picture, or if it's just the word literally or figuratively actually just means to publicize it. The point is the same. Don't do that. Don't publicize it. It's no different than saying, hey, everybody, look at this. And then, then you give to the needy. You want to go to the temple to give your alms, because that's what their practice would have been. They would have gone to the temple and there were special places or bins or chests or whatever it was that were designated for their giving. Well, I want to go at noon or 3 o'clock because that's when the most people are going to be there to see me do it. Just that kind of attitude is alone the kind of thing that Jesus is talking about. If that is your motive for giving, or even part of your motive, and that's what the word be praised, obviously, would mean. It's actually has the word glory built into it. It's based on the Greek word for glory, to receive glory, to influence somebody's opinion to influence one's opinion about another so as to enhance the latter's reputation. So, again, this is in the passive voice. So you're doing something so that your reputation will be enhanced in the eyes of people that see you. That's not a very good reason to be giving, is it? But he says that that's what the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets. They give simply to be praised by others. It's kind of like, we would have a chance of doing this every Sunday morning whenever we make our contributions that we've, laid by in store, we say. We could do that if we wanted to. It's harder now because of, the way we've been doing it lately, but just rewind, a few years ago, the plates being passed around. We could have every opportunity to make sure that the people around us or the man who is serving knows how much we gave, couldn't we? We could think of a way. You could give cash, or you could write a check, but, make sure he really sees that number on that check, or all kinds of things we could do just so people know, I want somebody to know how much I gave. And so I guarantee you that many Christians have done that before. Accidentally made their contribution seen to get glory from men. That's the idea here. You're wanting to get glory of men. So Jesus says, don't do that. Don't sound a trumpet. Don't publicize it. Don't make an announcement. Don't do anything to attract attention when you do that. That's what the hypocrites do. And that alone would be enough reason not to do it, just because they do it. Truly, he says, they've received their reward. Now, what's that mean? I thought he just said they will, if you do that, you won't receive a reward. But he says that these people, they've already received their reward.
The New American Standard says they have received their reward in full, which I think kind of helps
Okay.
that idea.
They've received the totality of whatever their reward will be. What is their reward?
Praise of men.
Okay, yeah. They received the only reward they're going to get. And it's the only reward they were trying to get, isn't it? Praise of men. So, yeah, they received their reward. They're not going to get anything else. They have nothing coming from the Father. They've received their reward, and their reward was attention and praise of men. So, mission accomplished. But, he says, in the next 2 verses, when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. This is a kind of hyperbole, I guess, because your hands don't know anything, do they? Your hand doesn't know anything. Neither one of your hands knows anything. The brain knows somehow. It tells the hands what to do. Your hands don't know anything. So, what is his point then? What can you imagine? Here's another picture being painted. You go to give to the needy, and your left hand doesn't know what your right hand's doing. Your right hand's given to the needy. Your left hand doesn't even know. How does that even work? What's his point? I think he kind of tells what his point is in the next verse. What does he mean by this strange left hand, right hand business?
Unseen.
Okay, unseen. ESV in verse 4 says, so that your giving may be in secret. Now again, remember what we said about Matthew 5:16. It doesn't mean that it is wrong to ever be seen doing good. But the motive is what is the main focus here. The heart, the motive, the intentions. That's the idea. It's not just the being seen part. We can't take this, what he says in verses 3 and 4, away from that context of in order to be praised by men. Although if you just read verses 3 and 4, then that's what you'll come away with, is that it's wrong to ever do a good thing in public. But with verses 1 and 2, and especially with Matthew, with chapter 5, verse 16, we know that that's not what Jesus is trying to say. So, in secret, the word translated in secret is like a hidden place, a hiding place, a hidden entity, something that is hidden. So do it in a way that it will be in secret. But somebody might say, well, then if it's in secret, then what about any reward? Doesn't that imply that there won't be how could there be a reward? Yeah, God will see. You can't keep it secret from God, no matter how secret. God will see, and He will reward you. He sees in secret. There's that word again. Give in secret, God will see in secret. And He will reward you. And by the way, it wouldn't be a good motive to give to the poor to receive a reward from God either. That's just as bad as doing it to receive a reward from man, isn't it? What's the difference? You're still doing it because you want to get something. And Jesus has already talked about that, didn't He, in the end of chapter 5, or the middle of chapter 5, about lending and not expecting to get even what you lent back, especially, or much less expecting to get more back. So that whole concept is built into what he's already been instructing in the previous chapter. So whether you're doing it to receive a reward from God or from man, that is both of those things are not right. You need to give to the needy because it's right. Because it'll please God, and because it'll help man and please the one who's in need. So the greatest praise or compliment that we could ever get is God looking down and smiling on what we've done, isn't it? But we won't feel that, will we? Not the way we'll feel we know that somebody saw. And again, not to get those two things confused, there's nothing wrong with being uplifted and encouraged because somebody found out or somebody saw and commended you or something. There's nothing wrong with, we shouldn't be ashamed of that. But that hopefully will not be our motive for the next time we give, hoping that that'll happen again. That's just an added bonus, you might say, an unintentional bonus. So it's all about getting the heart in the right place and doing things for the right reason. Any other thoughts or comments on that section? I said we only have 4 verses, but the next section is not in Matthew 6, so the next little portion of the lesson, the remainder. Don't let your left hand... If your left hand doesn't even know what your right hand's doing, nobody else is going to know either. That's the point there. That's why I use that hyperbolic language. Do it in such a way that even your left hand won't even know. In the context of the rampant habit of the Jews and hypocrites among the Jews overdoing it to be seen by men with their giving and their praying and their fasting. But we're just looking at the giving part first.
You can see that on television a lot, if you watch it. I don't, but a lot of they're singing and they want to show how much money they're going to give and all the stuff that they get when they go there.
Yeah.
They definitely don't have the right idea of praising God. It's more about they're on television or they get a lot of $1,000 if they give a promise or those different things.
Yeah. I'll donate to this hospital, but only if they'll name a wing after me, Put my name up there. And that way everybody for the rest of time will know that I'm the one that gave the money for that special, area wing of the hospital to be built, that kind of thing. And again, that's not to say that it will be wrong for somebody to donate and their name to be put up there, but is that the reason why they did that? Are they seeking the glory and praise of men exclusively or even primarily? That's the key, that's the problem. So that section was giving with a righteous heart. But now we'll sort of branch off and look at giving with a gracious hand. Maybe a liberal hand. Giving liberally. Acts chapter 2, verses 43 and 44. Acts chapter 4, verses 32 through 37. We get this picture of the early Christians, the first century Christians, of benevolence that should bring us to shame, to be honest. Here's what it says. Acts 2:43 first. All came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. I think it should have said 44 and 45, not 43 and 44. But had all things in common. They were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. Then we turn over to chapter 4, verses 32 through 37. It says, Now the full number of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one said that any of the things that belonged to him was his own, but they had everything in common. Verse 34 says, there was not a needy person among them, for as many as were owners of land or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold and laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. Very similar descriptions, just, Acts 4 obviously a little bit later. So this is the picture of the Christians in the first century, the church. Notice it says there was not a needy person where? As far as what the verse actually says. Among them. Okay? That is a reference to within the church, the Christians. Not a needy person in their midst. Clearly, Luke is not saying there was not a needy person in the entire world or even in the entire city. But among them, in their group, in their family, the church, there was no such thing as a needy Christian in the first century. And here's why. Same thing we read in chapter 2. Because those who had more than the others sold, their possessions, sold their lands. Chapter 4 says lands and houses. Chapter 2 said their possessions and belongings. So anything that they had that they could part with, they were selling it so that they could give money in this, common pool. I hesitate to use the word common because this picture has been used to try to claim that the church, the Christianity is communist, is a communism or communist-based ideology. And this proves it, some people would say. See, look, they have all things in common. That's a buzzword for communism. Everybody has to give all their stuff to this central treasury or whatever, and everyone is supplied from that. Well, no, that's not at all what we're reading about here. You know what the single difference that makes all the difference between Christianity and communism is in this context anyway? What's the difference? Free will. They were doing it because they wanted to. Nobody was making them. That's what communism is. The government takes all your stuff. You don't have a choice. They take it. In this case, these people had no obligation whatsoever, which Peter is going to tell Ananias and Sapphira in chapter 5. They had no obligation. They were doing it of their own free will because they wanted to be able to give. And it's like, well, I don't have any spare money, but I do have some spare things, so I'll sell those things, and now I'll have money, and I'll give it to the apostles. That's the picture that we see in the church of the first century. So what are some ways that you can give? What are some ways we can give? Besides selling your possessions and belongings and giving to the church. Okay, we can even give in the sense of just being kind and good to each other. I think that's a way to give. It's a form of giving. And in many instances, that can be even more powerful and impactful than giving of an actual, physical items.
Just encouraging others.
Encouraging others? Definitely.
Giving time.
Time? We can give time. Time is valuable. It seems like more and more time is valuable. So that can mean something and will mean something. So time, kindness, and encouragement. Somebody might have all the things in the world, all the money in the world, but they may be totally moved like they've never been before just by general kindness, simple kindness. Friendship, time, thoughtfulness.
Well, I passed my books on to another woman that we've studied before.
Mm-hmm.
And I passed them on to her, and she really enjoys them, but she's elderly and really can't get out. But she really enjoys them.
Okay. Yeah, so that's some giving for sure. Sometimes giving is spontaneous, isn't it? So you may not have thought about it. It's something comes up and you give spontaneously. Sometimes it's premeditated, planned. In times of emergency, that's sort of like spontaneous. But giving, we give to the church every week when we meet, and that money is used for different things, like Potter and Schultz Lewis and different things like that. Whatever we put that money towards, and that comes from the individual Christians ultimately. So, do you think we struggle in our giving? Well, before we go there, I'll read these other two verses, or two passages. Paul said, "You excel in everything. As you excel in everything, see that you excel in this act of grace also." And he's talking about giving to the poor saints in Macedonia. He says, or in Judea. "For if the readiness is there, it is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have." I've always liked that statement, been moved by that, because God, it's true spiritually, it's true physically, it's true in general. God does not expect from us something that we don't have, including in our giving. So, think of the woman who gave the 2 mites or whatever it was, and Jesus said she gave more than anybody. But you know what? She didn't give more than anybody, did she? She gave less than anybody, but she gave more than anybody, because those 2 mites were all she had. She gave more than anybody else as far as a percentage. And again, it's not that it's a percentage game, but he's telling a principle there, that just because you may not give as much, you may not have as much to give as somebody else, you can still give even more spiritually than they did, because it's about what you have, not what you don't have. God's not going to count it against you that you didn't give $1 million Sunday, because He knows you don't have $1 million to give Sunday. So it's according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. And then Galatians 6:2 says, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." So bearing one another's burdens, Paul says, actually fulfills the law of Christ. So, now back to the question. Why do we struggle? Or why do you think we struggle in regards to giving in that way? Or do we? Do you think we do?
I think because we're spoiled, we're used to having everything we want, when we want it, and how we want it. And during the COVID times, there's a few things you couldn't get, or you couldn't have, or you couldn't leave the house, or you were restricted by a lot of things. Or we're usually just whatever we want, we just get it, or go eat it, or go do whatever. And a lot of people aren't able to do that at all. Older people that can't get out, or they don't see anybody for a long time. And there's a lot of things we could do, visit them, call them, and different things that doesn't take money, but we struggle with it because we're used to being one way, and it's hard to break our patterns of life when we like it that way and we want it that way.
Yep. That can be definitely a contributing factor. Spoiled. How about giving to the church? Let's think about that specifically. What are some reasons why people might, maybe struggle is the wrong word, but be a little underwhelming in their giving on their regular contribution? You wouldn't believe, well, you probably would, you might believe, but some of the things that people have come up with as excuses to give next to nothing or not at all on Sunday in the regular contribution. I mean, it's the same old things, really. It's not really that shocking. Elders are no good. They waste all the money. Why would I give my money when I don't approve of what the elders use it for? And it doesn't matter what the elders use it for, that person's not going to approve of it no matter what. So they say, I don't approve of what the elders use the money for, but it's just because, I mean, that's just an excuse. That's all that it is. Or the elders, there's nothing that we use the money for. So what's the point? The church has, X amount of $1,000 in the bank. Why do I keep having to take money out of my bank account that I need when the church has a bunch of money already and they don't have anything to do with it? Or, you name it, any kinds of things. That kind of attitude just shows the heart. It exposes the heart, doesn't it? And most people wouldn't say that out loud. They might if it gets to a point where they're confronted with it by the elders or by somebody, and then it'll come out. But they've just condemned themselves by saying that kind of thing. But that is a kind of thing that keeps people from giving maybe as much as they could or should. Being spoiled, like you said, is a lot of it too. Convincing ourselves that there's no need. I've used the example many times from looking at Malachi about how they were given the blind and the lame, and they could have very well justified, that God doesn't need my sheep. And why would He need a healthy sheep? It's just a sacrifice. It's going to be killed anyway, so what's the difference between a dead sheep that was blind when it was alive versus a dead sheep that wasn't blind when it was alive? What does God care? And so that can justify, we use that to justify not giving the best sheep that we have, because God doesn't need it. Well, we can do that with our money too, can't we? I need my money a lot more than God does. Why am I giving my money to God? God could make Himself a gazillion dollars right now if He wanted to. He could just say, let there be a gazillion dollars, and there it would be. What's God got to use money for? See how silly it is just to even think of that concept. But a lot of times we go to those silly lengths to try to avoid doing something we know. What can we do? What are some things we can do to overcome struggles in our giving? What do you think?
Help them change their mind.
Okay, we can help each other, maybe. Help each other. It's always a good thing to help each other, to do better. How about praying about it? Is that ever a bad idea? Depending on what you're praying for, I guess. If you're praying for bad things, then, maybe. But, what's that? Yeah, praying about this kind of thing is a very good idea. Don't limit God. Kind of some of the things I just mentioned as example excuses, in a way they limit God. Like, God's not going to be able to do any good with the money. Or if the money goes for this or that, are we limiting God's ability? That goes back to the whole that's not going to work game. That won't work. Well, that won't work. That won't work. The church needs to do something. What should we do? Should we do this? No, that won't work. What about this? No, that won't work. Then you know what we do? Nothing. And somehow that's going to work? Nothing will work, but none of those other things will work. So I think that's a way of limiting God's power and ability. Yeah.
Can we get rid of some of those things that we don't really need?
Yeah, the things that we don't need. Just the things that we need, And it's sad. It's a sad pattern of behavior that has been confirmed over and over, time and time again. Whenever finances start to get a little rough, what's the first expense that gets cut?
Cable.
Not cable. It should be, maybe. It should have been. It's the contribution check. And, it's just kind of a side effect, I guess. The secrecy element allows that to be done more easily. Not saying that we should publicize, because that goes exactly against what Jesus is talking about in our study here. But the fact that it's secret, I think, is one reason why it makes it so easy. to do that, because somebody's going to know what it is, unless I give cash every time and I give it very secretly. But those of us that write checks, somebody's going to know, but most people aren't going to know. So it's easy for me to just, cut it by 25% or something like that. And again, that's not to say that it will be wrong to do that if necessary, but that is usually, or many times, the very first thing that is cut. It should be near the end of the list, but it's always the first. Do you have something?
In all the years I was in finance, very few people ever told me what they gave. That tells me that it's not their money. I had people who did, because it was first in their list. But it's just like speaking to someone. There's so many things. You've got to start somewhere. Maybe you're strapped right now. But if you prioritize things, you can start with a little, eliminate this, go a little more. You can work at it. If you want to take the time and the effort to do it, it's up to you. The one thing for sure, while it is secret in the church, it's what people give. You're going to stand one day before Almighty God, who has blessed you with everything you have, and give an account for how you've used it. If you've used it to benefit His cause, or primarily to benefit you.
Yep. And if we're overly happy about the fact that it's so secret, that might be an indicator that we would be ashamed. And maybe, we need to remind ourselves that God, like Jesus said, God sees in secret. Nobody else may see that, but God knows how much you give, and He knows how much you could give. Yeah, Ron?
I think the more we understand and realize how much God has blessed us and is blessing us, the more giving that we will be. I think that was the widow that gave. She realized how much she'd been blessed. And I think that may come sometime with age as we get older. We have more appreciation for what God has blessed us with when we're younger, although we're young too. But when we realize what God has done for us, and not only saving us, but just how He works in our lives and everything, I think that causes us to be more giving.
Yeah, look how much He's given for us. After all, there's not a single thing in the world that we can give to anybody that didn't come from Him. So He's the one that gave us everything that we have. That's why the prayer in, I think it's 1 Chronicles 29 is so powerful, because David is saying at the dedication of the temple, or not the dedication of the temple, but the dedicating the things that were given to the building of the temple. He said, everything that we got here came from You. So thank You for giving us that we can give it back to You for this. We're thankful for being so blessed to be able to give like this. It's a blessing. So that kind of also goes along with understanding that, like Ron said, how much God has given for us, and understanding that God, everything that we have to give has come from God. So let's have a giving spirit and give maybe more than we have in the past. There's something liberating about letting go of some of these things that we need. Even if we are nervous about it, or like, I can't imagine doing that, fight against those urges to, like, there's no need for me to do that, and do it. And it might actually be freeing